Alex, how you doing, man?
Hey, Kelly, what's up?
Well, I'm pretty excited because do you know what episode number this is?
I don't. Maybe 30 something?
I know it feels like only 30, but this is 99.
Oh, 99.
99. And next week is our big 100th episode celebration. So if you're listening to this and you want to hear like a great retrospective about Dirt Nap City, you're going to want to tune in next week for that.
Do you remember the song 99 Luftballons?
Ah, ja. 99 Luftballons.
By Nena?
Nena, yes, I do.
And it was a real treat when the German version of the song came on. Remember that? Like
it was awesome, yeah.
Because they would always play the American version, and they played it a lot, probably too much. But every now and then, you'd hear that German version, and it would really like light your fire for a second, yeah.
I agree. And then there's a band, 7 Seconds, if you remember them, kind of a punk rock band. They did a cover of that was really awesome.
Oh, I do remember that, yeah.
You know, that song was all about misunderstanding and kind of World War III starting because those balloons, they thought it was, you know, back at base, bugs in the software, sent a message, something's out there. The war machine springs to life. It was a great song.
Very 80s song.
Well, I'm going to take you back a little further than the 80s today to Italy. We're going to travel to Italy.
We've gone to Italy before with Casanova, with Marco Polo.
That's
with,
right.
Chef Boyardee a little bit.
Yes, yeah. Italy is it's a grand old country, a beautiful place. Have you ever been to northern Italy?
I have not. Where the mountains are.
Yeah, the Dolomites. I think they're called Dolomites.
No, I would love to go out there.
The Alps kind of borders with Switzerland. It is really beautiful. There's some beautiful lakes, Lake Garda, Como. The person we're talking about actually was born in 1898 in northern Italy.
Okay.
He had some nicknames. One was Il Egonier, which means the engineer, or Il Cavaliere, which means the knight, or Il Mago, which means the wizard.
Oh, sure. The wizard, the magician.
He was also called Il Patriarca, which was the patriarch. Sometimes he was called Il Grande Vecchio, which was the grand old man. Now, these were all later in life. He wasn't born with these nicknames. When he was born, he was just kind of a normal sort of peasant kind of guy. But what he ended up doing was building one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it sounds like since he was an old, like it doesn't sound like he was an American immigrant, or they wouldn't be calling him that stuff. So
he never came to the U.S.
I could go with, oh, really? Yeah. So I was going to say like Ferrari or Lamborghini. Am I on the right track?
We're talking about Enzo Anselmo Giuseppe Maria Ferrari.
Ferrari, yeah. He never came to the U.S., huh?
No, Enzo Ferrari. He also never flew in an airplane, and he never rode in an elevator.
Was he scared of elevators? Wouldn't that be funny? A Ferrari was scared of elevators.
Race car driver, but no,
too fast.
Yeah, I think part of it was the technology at the time, but he kind of ended up not going to a lot of races later in life for a variety of reasons, and kind of staying around his hometown of Monza. So, yeah, he was born in 1898. What's also curious about his birthday is most things say, and the birth certificate says February 20th, but he was actually born on February 18th. And this had to do with the law at the time. When a child was born, they had to report it to the local officials. Well, apparently there was a snowstorm or some reason it got reported 2 days later. So the official birth date on his birth certificate said February 20th, but he was actually born on February 18th.
Well, I was going to say maybe the birth records place was on the 20th floor and they had to take the stairs.
Right. It took 2 days. So he also, do you want to guess when he died? Because you may not know like how long he lived for.
if he never flew in an airplane, and he was probably a rich guy, and he never came to the U.S., obviously, he probably died pretty young. I'm guessing maybe he died in the 40s.
He didn't die till 1988.
Oh, wow.
At the age of 90. No, he lived to be 90.
He just didn't feel like coming here, huh? Or getting on a plane?
Kind of get into all that. As I said, he was from northern Italy, born to Alfredo Ferrari and Adalgisa Bispini. Now, I did listen to an audiobook about him, and I got to tell you, the Italian names are all very musical sounding. They're all very beautiful and musical sounding. Bassini, Ferrari, and this was Bispini, his mother. And he had an older brother named Alfredo Jr., who went by the nickname of Dino. And his older brother actually became an ambulance driver during World War I.
No.
He did. Dino, not Enzo. Enzo was not the ambulance driver. Enzo ended up going into the military in World War I, but his job was to shoe mules. He was a mule shoer.
The ironic part about all these ambulance drivers in Dirt Nap City is you don't really need an ambulance in Dirt Nap City. There's no need for the ambulance drivers.
Well, unfortunately, in 1916, his brother died, but he didn't die from driving the ambulance or being shot or anything. He died from a flu outbreak. And his father, that same year, also died. And Enzo, who was in the military in 1918, also caught a really bad flu and was discharged.
That was the year of the Spanish flu. That
was it?
The pandemic.
And it spread to Italy?
Oh, yeah. I think it started in Spain.
Okay. Well, Enzo was released from the military due to the flu. He was actually put into a hospital, and it was a pretty bad place. It was basically where they sent you to die, but somehow he pulled through and got out. He got married in 1923 to Laura Garello, and it turns out after they met and got married, she was a very jealous and suspicious person. And not only that, to make matters worse, Enzo's mother did not like her, and she didn't like Laura did not like Enzo's mother. And so they were, oil and water, fighting all the time, very, very catty towards one another. And it just didn't make for a very good situation for Enzo Ferrari. But I don't know if you knew this. Did you know that divorce was not legal in Italy until 1970?
Oh, is that a Roman Catholic thing? I think that the what is it called? The Vatican II, I think they called it when the Pope kind of modernized everything around then and decided that divorce was going to be illegal.
It was very looked down upon, of course, but it was also illegal in Italy until 1970. So he stuck with his marriage. He had, he had some affairs on the side, and we'll talk about those a little later. But basically, when he got back from serving in World War I, his family's business was kind of in turmoil because his father and his brother had died, and his father and brother had both worked in the business. They had a machine shop. They did things like ball bearings and metal pipes and fairings and all that kind of stuff. And this is right around the time when cars were getting really popular. Now, before his father had died, when Enzo was about 8 years old, he and his brother had gone to see a race called the Circuito di Bologna in Bologna. And that was in 1908. And from that point, he had a love with cars and racing. And he was, as a matter of fact, the reason his brother had become an ambulance driver was because their family had a car and his brother knew how to drive. That was kind of the thing is a lot of people didn't know how to drive back then.
So remember when we talked about Henry Ford, we talked about the Model T and how that was pretty much the only car that you found on the road. Were there Model Ts that people were driving?
No, I think these were European cars. early European,
Okay.
like, back then there were a few brands that were already, like Fiat was a big brand in
Okay.
early in Italy. I don't know what kind of car they were driving right out of the gate, but so Enzo Ferrari decided, kind of when he got out of the military, he was going to do one of three things. He was going to be a race car driver, or he was going to be a journalist because he loved journalism, or he was going to be an opera singer because he loved to sing opera.
It's so Italian.
Kind of a weird mix.
That's,
yeah.
but it's pretty much every Italian. That's their three options, I suppose, right?
right. So he went with race car driver
Or pasta maker.
or pasta. Yeah. Put them in cans.
I mean, Chef
sell 'em to
Boyardee's
Americans.
case. Thank God Chef Boyardee didn't become an opera singer, right?
Yeah, that would have been a missed opportunity and a bad thing all around for us. Well, he actually got back from the war and decided, because his brother and his father were dead, it was his turn to take care of the family. His business was in ruins, so he went to actually see if he could get a job at Fiat, because at the time Fiat was the biggest car manufacturer. I think they were based in Milan or in Turin at the time, one of those two, which was a little ways from where he lived. But he traveled, basically got turned down by Fiat, but ended up getting another job for a company called CMN that made the bodies, like the kind of chassis and the bodies for small passenger cars. That was his first experience building cars. He was able to actually, in 1920, join the racing department for Alfa Romeo. And again, because he was a driver, there weren't a lot of people that could drive cars. And so he wanted to do it. He had the passion for it. So he joined the Alfa Romeo driving team in 1920. He won his first Grand Prix in 1923, which is a pretty big deal. 1924 was actually his pinnacle season as a race car driver, where he had 3 Grand Prix wins. And, at the time, you mentioned a couple of these. Can you, I think you named all these, or we've talked about them: Ferrari, Maserati, Alfa Romeo, Fiat. There was also Lancia. Have you heard of Lancia?
No. What about Lamborghini?
So Lamborghini, funny enough, was founded in 1948. So a little later than all this was taking place. But you know what they did initially? They didn't make race cars.
Oh, what do they make?
So they were called Lamborghini Trattori. And I found this out by watching Clarkson's Farm. I don't know if you ever watched Top Gear or the Grand Tour. Did you ever watch either of those shows?
No.
Jeremy Clarkson bought a Lamborghini tractor because that's what they made, was tractors. They were building tractors for,
okay.
Yeah, Lamborghini. I mean, you think that sounds kind of funny, right? What are you driving? Oh, it's a Lamborghini tractor. They still make tractors, but supposedly there's a legend that says that there was a disagreement between Ferruccio Lamborghini and Enzo Ferrari about the quality of the clutch in a Ferrari, and that's when Lamborghini decided to build sports cars, because he thought Lamborghini had poorly made clutches.
Wow.
So he became a race driver. He was doing okay. His marriage was not doing well because he traveled a lot. He didn't see his wife much. As I said, his wife was very jealous. And his wife also didn't get along with his mother, which is never a good thing. And so kind of,
but a common theme in on this show for sure.
The wife and the mother.
Yeah, I think Einstein was the first time we had heard about this.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
It's always a thing. Yeah, it's always a problem.
But not for us, not for you and me, right?
No. I'm talking about Dirt Nap City people. In order to be great, it's like a prerequisite. You have to drive an ambulance.
Yeah, you have to be a little off.
You have to do bad in school.
Yeah,
you have to do bad in school. So bad that your teachers say how bad you are.
Right. They point it out all the time.
And then, yeah, exactly.
So anyway,
these are some common themes.
True. And we're going to really get to that in our 100th episode. He decided to retire from being a driver. He was an okay driver, but not a great driver. and wanted to form his own driving team. And so he actually was able to form a team of drivers with cars, but it was sponsored by Alfa Romeo. So have you ever heard the name of this? Do you know what his driving racing team is called? It's Scuderia Ferrari.
No, I haven't heard that.
And Scuderia is the Italian word for stable. So it was like a stable of drivers that he led. It's still called Scuderia Ferrari. The racing team for Ferrari is still called that. But he led that under Alfa Romeo. And there was some national pride with Italy, right? Because Alfa Romeo was an Italian company. They really wanted to take on the likes of Mercedes. They didn't like the Germans. They wanted, and the English, they wanted to be able to, McLaren and some other brands, they wanted to be able to beat them.
When you say beat them, do you mean in races or like in market share and selling commercial cars?
Great question. 100% races. As a matter of fact, I was about to ask you, what do you think of when you hear the word Ferrari?
Yeah, I think of luxury, fast cars that are very expensive that only a few people can afford. And then I think of racing, like,
but you think of racing
F1
second.
Racing, maybe. Yeah,
you think of luxury cars and like Monaco and yachts and beautiful people.
Yeah,
that's the first thing.
Sure.
So Enzo Ferrari didn't care about any of that. The only reason that he did build cars was to fund the racing team. All he cared about was racing.
Wow. So they weren't trying to get market share or put a car in every garage. It was not like Henry Ford.
No, as a matter of fact, the early days, they built less than 100 cars a year in their factory in the early days. Very, very exclusive. They were expensive. They were handcrafted. They were beautifully made, but they were a luxury brand selling to princes and actors and actresses and musicians and politicians. I mean, people would come over to Italy to buy these vehicles in the mid 1900s.
So they're rare as like a Maybach today, right? Just something that you just don't see on the road, but you hear about them.
Some years for a particular style of car or a particular model, I guess, they would only make like 5. They'd have like 4 models. They were only going to do 20 cars, and they would make 5 of each one. So there's cars out there that are very, very rare.
Not like Henry Ford at all.
No, the opposite. He really wanted to be known for luxury. He cared a lot about appearances. He cared a lot about style. He cared a lot about the way people thought about them. But apparently he was kind of a son of a gun. He had a little bit of a temper. He was very... I think this is kind of stereotypical for Italians, but he had kind of a passionate, hot head. He'd get a little upset and yell at people, and he was known to spit or burp, just kind of like he didn't care. Like, he would just be very crude and disrespectful around people, and that's just how he was.
Kind of like you.
Just like me and Enzo. World War II broke out, and they actually had to shut down the factory because the fascist government of Mussolini took over and made them build war stuff. They're like, hey, you guys have machine shop here. You've got to build war stuff. There's a lot of speculation about how supportive Ferrari was of the fascists, and at the time, kind of what's said is he didn't necessarily want to support them, but he didn't have much choice.
Sure.
If you didn't support them, you would be shut down. You could be executed. You could be taken in as a prisoner. And so he did have some associations with the fascist party, but it was kind of one of these things where almost everybody in Italy did at that time. You did, or else you got a thunking. But he also, after the war, was found out to have done some things to kind of support other parties that were subversing the fascist party. He did things like he had delivery trucks where he would deliver that were used to take the race cars to races, and he would hide things in there and hide dissidents in there and deliver food to people that were under investigation by the fascists and stuff like that. And that all came out after the war. Well, 1947, 1948, the war's over. He really doubles down on the Ferrari brand. And can you imagine the logo? Can you describe it to me?
Yeah, I can. I was just thinking about that. There's a big F, right? Oh, is it an F?
No.
Or is it a horse?
It's a horse.
It's a horse.
It's a horse.
I'm thinking of the Foo Fighters logo. Sorry. There's a horse. It's like a Mustang, but it's he's like riding. He's on his hind legs, right? No.
Yes. Okay. Yes. It's called the prancing horse.
Okay.
That's the official name of it. That actually came from a countess whose son had been killed in World War I. Her son had a necklace or some sort of piece of jewelry that had that horse on it, and she gave it to Enzo as a gift. I guess maybe he sold her a car or something, and he took that horse. He really liked it, and he started in 1932 painting it on the side of the Scuderia Ferrari races.
Yeah, and there's a horsepower meaning to that.
Yeah. The wildness of it. It symbolizes courage, passion, dominance, speed.
Wait, if that was in the 40s, I bet you the Mustang ripped that off then.
Oh, well, a Mustang is a horse, so
right. But I mean, they might have ripped the whole idea of a horse off. These days, I'm not putting anything past Henry Ford. You know how I feel about Henry Ford.
You've heard of Ford versus Ferrari, right? That movie.
Sure.
Did you ever see that?
I don't remember if I did. Was it a rival between the two companies or between Henry Ford and Enzo Ferrari?
The two companies on the racetrack. So Ford actually used to. So let me go back to the logo real quick. It is the horse, and it's over a red color that is representative of speed and of Ferrari. It's called Ferrari red. There's a shield on it that is kind of evolved over time, but there's always been that shield. Yeah. And then there's a background that's yellow. The horse is black. There's red. It's black, red, and yellow. And the yellow is actually a tribute to Modena, which is Enzo Ferrari's hometown. That was the color of his hometown. So yeah, it definitely is a well-known logo. Not as well-known as something like Apple or Atari or Google or something like that. Maybe not Atari, but
no, but not
as well-known. But
now that you describe it, yeah, I can totally picture it. I haven't, I haven't seen as many Ferraris in my life as you do. I'm not in that echelon that you are. I don't ride with those folks like you do.
I have ridden in a couple of Ferraris. Have you ever ridden in a Ferrari?
I don't even know if I've seen more than like maybe 3 in my life. I don't live in the same. I don't travel in the same circles as you, my friend.
Someday you will.
I don't know.
Hashtag goals, right? Well, so he's got his logo, he's got his Scuderia, he's got his drivers, and he started to win, and he started to have some success. So I watched this show. I was never a big fan of Formula One until I started watching Drive to Survive, which is on Netflix. It's a show all about Formula One, and it's really great. I mean, when you understand what's going on in Formula One, it's a lot more interesting than just cars going around a track because there's a lot of technology. They're trying to solve a tech problem. And in 1950 is the first year that Formula One, it was called the Drivers' World Championship. And Formula One, the name for that is actually about the rules. So there's a formula that they have to follow with the cars, and it's very specific, and it changes every year. So the car has to have a certain weight, a certain size, a certain compression on the engine, certain amount of, aerodynamic things that they can and can't do on it. Really, really specific. Huge book of rules they have to follow, and that is Formula One. That is what is called Formula One for cars. He joined Formula One in 1950, which is right when it started. As a matter of fact, Ferrari is the only company to race in every season of Formula One since its inception. No other company has done that. Others have come and gone. So he's leading his Formula One team. He's becoming a sort of a titan in that space. And unfortunately, in 1956, his only son, who was named after his brother Dino, his name was Alfredo as well, but they called him Dino. He died of muscular dystrophy in 1956, and that really was hard on Enzo. Enzo was very close with his son. He really loved his son. He even said something to the effect one time about if you tell a woman you love her, it means you want her. The only true love is between a man and his son, was something that he said after Dino died. Hit him hard. Well, so that was 1956 when his son died. 1957, there's this race called the Mille Miglia, and that is a 1,000-mile or 1,600-kilometer race in Italy. Pretty famous. See, before Formula One, a lot of these races were hundreds of miles, or 100 miles, or 200 miles over open roads, like a 14-mile track or a 300-mile track. Well, the 1957 Mille Miglia, which took place in Italy, had a crash. And unfortunately, the crash was a Ferrari car. A tire blew out. It killed the driver. And at that time, they also had a co-driver because it was such a long distance. They would swap out and one would navigate and one would drive. It killed 9 spectators, 5 of which were children.
Oh, my goodness.
At the time, when this sort of thing happened, there's always an investigation. But in Italy, the manufacturer of the car, the owner of the car, could be held liable. And they did. They threw the book at him in 1957 and said that he was charged with manslaughter.
Oh, my goodness.
He was prosecuted. There was even a article in the Vatican newspaper that compared Enzo Ferrari to Saturn, the god who devoured and killed his children, because he was killing boys from Italy. That was the point. They weren't safe enough. They were pushing them too hard,
especially after just losing his son too. It must have been awful.
Yeah, car racing, I think, has gotten safer in recent years, but there's been so many really serious accidents, and this killed, like I said, 5 children, so 11 people total, including 5 children and the driver and the co-driver. So that was a big thing for him. He was Catholic in name only. He didn't really attend church or go to confession or anything like that. But he was pretty hurt that the Vatican called him out for killing. And he got to where he didn't want to go to races. He wanted to keep racing, but he didn't want to be there. He got really kind of private and shy, didn't want to be out in the open. He was able to continue on. Again, throughout the 60s, his team had off and on success and failure. Sometimes they'd win, sometimes they'd lose. And then in 1974, a guy named Niki Lauda, an Austrian driver, joined. Now, have you ever heard of Niki Lauda?
I have, but I don't know anything about it. I have heard that name, though.
Well, there's certain drivers like Senna. If you've ever heard of Senna, just heard the name.
Yeah.
Niki Lauda, Lewis Hamilton has been pretty famous recently. Max Verstappen. These are just like the guys who just win and win. Well, Niki Lauda was one of those. He won, and in Formula One, the way it works is there's two cups you can win. There's the Drivers' Cup, which is for the most points for a driver, and then there's what's called the Constructors' Cup, and the Constructors' Cup is for the team. So ultimately, you want to win both, right? You want the driver to win and the whole team to win, but one can win without the other winning. You can have, a driver that's not the fastest in every one, but accumulate the most points throughout the season and still win the Constructors' Cup, or you can have a driver that wins, but you don't get the most points. Niki Lauda was killing it, doing great, and won the Drivers' Champion and the Constructors' Cup in 1974. And then in 1976, he was in a crash in Nuremberg. It was a really sketchy race course already, and a lot of the drivers weren't very excited about racing on it because it had a lot of issues with potholes and not enough safety measures. Now they have barriers. They didn't have enough barriers to absorb these crashes. Well, Niki Lauda was burned extremely badly, pulled from a burning car, and they thought he was actually dead. His eyelids were burned off and had to be replaced surgically, burns over his whole body. Well, Enzo thinks, well, this guy's done, and starts looking for replacements and trying to find someone to come in. Well, Niki Lauda said, no, I'm coming back. And Enzo was like, I don't know if you need to do that. And about 6 weeks later, he came back and got fourth place in the Italian Grand Prix, which was a big deal for Ferrari because that's their home. 6 weeks after all this, he had broken bones. He had, and he was in a lot of pain. Apparently, when he put on his racing suit, kind of blood and stuff oozed through it. Even 6 weeks later, it was still a lot of things not there. But he came back and got fourth place. Then he went to a race in Japan, the Fuji race, and he lost his nerve because it was raining and decided not to race. Basically, started the race and then didn't finish, which cost them points. And Enzo was not happy about that, but then, and said so, he said a driver it's his job to go. And of course, Lauda had just been through a lot and didn't want it to happen again. He saw the conditions were bad. He ended up winning the drivers' championship again in 1977 for Ferrari. And it's said that he did it out of spite. That at that point, he didn't feel like, Enzo had treated him very well or supported him during this, tried to replace him, was already trying to replace him before he had a chance to come back and do his thing. So this was the kind of person that Enzo was as a owner of the Ferrari Scuderia Ferrari team. He really didn't feel like the drivers were the most important part of the equation. He thought the cars were, and he thought drivers were a dime a dozen and could be replaced. And that's just how he thought. It worked for him sometimes, but it didn't always work. And it certainly left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths.
It's crazy that the 70s, so Niki Lauda and Evel Knievel basically existed at the same time. There's no way they didn't know each
Right.
other and hang out. They just seemed like they would kind of like kindred spirits, right?
Yeah. A couple of wild men that like to go fast and like to do crazy stuff.
And both in the hospital a lot.
Yes. Well, Niki Lauda was only there the one time, and then he came back. He actually ended up not only winning the Drivers' Championship in 1977 for Ferrari, he won again with McLaren and won again with another team called Brabham, Brabham, Brabham. I don't know how you say that, but he was a champion. He was a great driver, and Enzo could never really admit that. He thought it was the cars.
But I have a feeling I'm going to be thinking about the burned eyelids long after this podcast is over. Like and then 6 weeks. I don't even know what technology you would replace eyelids with.
Especially in the 70s, right?
Yeah. Did they do just a bad job or give him some kind of makeshift eyelids?
I haven't looked at any pictures of him.
Ugh. I'm not sure you want to. He hasn't slept in 40 years.
Rip Van Winkle. Another thing that Enzo Ferrari would do to get his way when Formula One, there's a governing board of Formula One. There's a couple actually, and I don't remember all their names. But when they would send a fine to him, or when they would try to get him to change something about his car, he would threaten to quit. He would say, if you keep doing this to me, I'm going to quit Formula One. I'm not going to race anymore. And he threatened, as a matter of fact, one time he even threatened to come to the U.S. and drive an Indy, like to drive the Indianapolis 500 in the Indy series, which is similar to Formula One, but different. They built a car, they sent it over, and it crashed on like the 40th lap. So that was the end of that. But he was always bluffing. Mm-hmm. He wouldn't actually quit. He just did that to get his way. It was kind of one of these things where he had enough clout in Italy that, and in the racing world, that they would sort of kowtow to him when he did that.
Kind of like you.
Anyway, he ended up needing more money to keep, racing cars is very expensive. And one of the problems that he had was he tried to race in a lot of different categories. He raced in, these sort of long off-road, I don't know what you even call them, where you drive 1,000 miles across country. I should know what that's called.
Like endurance races, yeah.
Endurance, yes, thank you. Endurance races. He raced in Formula One. He raced in a lot of just smaller races that were sponsored, and you could get money in different types of cars. He and all of that was costing him a lot of money, but it was his passion. That's what he wanted to do. He knew it wasn't the most cost effective. Eventually, Ford did try to buy Ferrari. Ford made an offer to buy it, and I think it was $18 million at the time, and this was in the 60s. He was going to sell to Ford. He thought it was going to be a good deal. His only requirement was that he had 100% control of the racing activities until he died. He was fine with Ford taking over the manufacture of the cars. But that deal fell through because Ford basically said, no, if we tell you you can't race in a race, you can't race in a race. He didn't want that. So he ended up selling to Fiat in 1969. When Fiat bought Ferrari, the whole deal was that he sold 50% of the company to Fiat and that he would remain in racing, in control of the racing activities. And then when he died in 1988, Fiat's holdings became 90%. Now, I told you his son, Dino, had died. He had another son named Piero, but that was not his wife's son. It was his mistress's son. He didn't have the Ferrari last name because they couldn't divorce, and he couldn't officially give him his last name. But Piero worked there, and Laura would come and just, berate him. You bastard, I can't believe you're here,
Sure.
etc. Well, eventually Laura died. Enzo and Piero outlived her. And now I believe that Piero was, for a little while, the head of Ferrari and had a 10% ownership stake in it. And he actually did get Ferrari's name after Laura died. Ferrari officially adopted him and gave him his last name, even though he was really his son. And Piero Ferrari, I believe, is still alive. You can see videos of him talking about his father and stuff like that. But yeah, he was pretty reserved. He didn't like to travel. He didn't like to do interviews. He was usually stuck to the races in Italy. Like, he liked to just go to the races in Italy. He didn't like to go to races outside of Italy. But he did have a literal, like a lady that he had an affair with for years and years. She moved in with him after his wife died, and that was Piero's mother. He had a long-term relationship, like a whole other family, basically.
Yeah.
Well, he did, he did get a lot of recognition. Eventually, the Vatican forgave him and, kind of rescinded their story about calling him Saturn and eating his own children. He was given, and the Pope, John Paul II, came to visit him when he was 90, but at that time he was so sick he actually couldn't meet with the Pope. But the Pope did bless him from afar. He was given the Knight of the Grand Cross by Italy, which is the highest thing you can get in Italy as a private citizen. And he died in 1988 at the age of 90 of leukemia. And he was so secretive that he actually didn't want it to be reported that he had died until the next day. When he died, he wanted his funeral to take place the next day, and then the day after that to release it to the media. So they had a secret, private funeral just for his family on August 15th, and then on August 16th, his death was reported, and he died on August 14th. So kind of like his birth certificate, his death date was also
2 days late.
Yeah, bit.
He's always 2 days late.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting for a fast guy like that. So when you rode in the Ferrari, was it really luxurious or was it just fast?
No, it wasn't luxurious. So I've ridden in two that I can think of right now. One is a friend of mine named Curtis who has a Ferrari, and And then the other one was the founder of a company that I worked for, had gotten really rich and had a Ferrari, and I happened to ride with him one time. They were not super comfortable. The seats weren't plush. They were very well appointed, lots of wood and leather and, beautiful details on the seats and on the stitching and on the dashboard. Everything looks really nice, but it's all very utilitarian. At least, and this was the last time I think was probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago. And then the time before that was 8 or 10 years before that. I don't know. I don't know if Ferraris now have big screens in them. I would think they don't. I would think that like kind of a Tesla style screen or a backup camera wouldn't be something they would put in a Ferrari.
Do they make only sports cars? Like, is there a Ferrari sedan that you can buy? Or are they only like 2-seaters?
No, they're all sports cars. I'm pretty sure they do make some that have a back seat, but the back seat is tiny. It's pretty useless. And as I said, in the 50s, they were only making less than 100 cars a year. That was all they made. You want to take a guess how many cars they're making per year today?
Geez, I don't know. 1 million?
14,000.
Still not very many.
14,000 cars a year. Not very many, yeah. And that's why they're so expensive.
What do they cost? About 200,000?
So the Ferrari Roma, which is their kind of starter model, is 247,000.
Wow.
And if you want that's for the coupe. If you want the Spider edition, which has some extra stuff, it's about 280,000. The Portofino is around 250,000. And then you get up into their higher end stuff that are more faster, more like stuff that you would take on a racetrack. The Ferrari 812 Competition is 430,000. The Ferrari SF90 Stradale Spider is 600,000. The Ferrari Daytona SP3 is 2.2 million. And then there is a rumored Ferrari F80. It's not even sure that this exists, but this is a rumor that is supposed to today. This is 2025. That is supposed to cost between 3.1 and 3.9 million.
But you know what? If you're in traffic, you can still only go about 4 miles an hour.
Right. That clutch is going to go out on you because they have bad clutches.
So who, if you don't know this, we can cut this out, but who was Testarossa?
It's actually an interesting answer. So the Ferrari Testarossa was not a person, but Testarossa in Italian means redhead. So Testa, I guess, is head and Rossa is red. And it had to do with the color of the car, the way it was painted.
If you just drive a Honda Civic and it's red, you could say it's a Testarossa Civic, right?
Yeah. I guess if it's the same red as the Ferrari 1957 World Champion car and it's painted in the same way.
Or if you just have red hair, you could say you're a Testarossa.
He really had that spirit of the value of the brand and the Ferrari fans. So have you heard of the Ferrari fans? Do you much about them? Where did I put this?
The fans, like the devotees, people that like it.
Yes, they have a name.
You mean like Swifties or?
Exactly.
Is it an Italian name?
Yeah. So the supporters of Ferrari are called the Tifosi, Tifosi, and it's a word meaning a typhus patient because they have feverish enthusiasm.
Call back to Typhoid Mary there.
Right.
Not so funny when it was really happening.
The Tifosi are dedicated people in Italy, and you're right. Formula One is where you see a lot of them come out. They come out for especially the Italian races. They come out to support Ferrari. But these are the folks that wear the merchandise, that understand the culture, that watch the races, that know the history of Ferrari. They're just really an enthusiastic set of fans, much like Swifties, like you just said.
Would you consider yourself one, a Tifosi?
No, not at all. Not at all. I just was interested because you did Henry Ford, and I thought be nice to see another perspective on someone who founded a well-known car company, but pretty different, right? I mean, the difference between Ford and Ferrari is they're both car companies, and that's about where it stops.
And we did DeLorean too.
That's right. Well, that was Enzo Ferrari. There is, like I said, there was a model that was called the Dino. There is actually a model called the Enzo that came out after his death to honor him. They still only make about 14,000 cars a year. And if you ever get a chance to ride in one, I would say do it just for the fun of it. But as far as buying one for $500,000, probably not going to happen. Even if I had that money to throw around, I don't think that would be how I would spend it.
Mm-hmm. Vroom, vroom.
Enzo dreamed of ink and news at dawn. A voice so bold, he could sing till the stars shone on, or thunder down the track beneath the burning sun. A life of choices where speed always won. He raced the wind, he danced with fire. Through gears and dreams he climbed high and higher. A Scuderia's heartbeat in his veins, no room for shortcuts, no canned refrains. Pasta spilled like poetry on his plate. Never knew a can of irony on his fate. He chased the roar where his stories made. Pen and stage left silent in his arcade. He raced the wind, he danced with fire. Through gears and dreams he climbed high and higher. A Scuderia's heartbeat in his veins, no room for shortcuts, no canned refrains. Hear the echoes, the engines wail, not as a tenor, but a track's tale. Through life's sharp curves, he carved his name, a legend born of fearless flame. Taste 1,000 dreams, but his was raw, no process schemes. Speed was scripture and the road divine. He sang in engine notes, he drew the line. The world can taste 1,000 dreams, but his was raw, no processed schemes.